He got the promotion, the corner office, and just hours later, he served me divorce papers on the night he achieved everything we worked for. But he forgot one thing. I still hold the key to his entire downfall. The champagne was still fizzing, a cascade of golden bubbles mirroring the elation that had flooded our apartment just an hour before. Mark, beaming, had just hung up the phone, the celebratory call from his CEO still echoing in the silence. Promotion, partner, the corner office. Everything we had been working toward for the last decade, the sacrifices, the late nights fueled by instant coffee and sheer ambition, it was finally his. I held up my glass, my eyes shining with pride for the man I'd meticulously helped build into this success story. To the future, darling, I toasted, my voice thick with genuine happiness. He took a long, slow sip, his eyes, usually so warm, distant, and strangely flat. He set the crystal flute down on the mahogany coffee table with a decisive clink that sounded less like celebration and more like a gavel striking wood. Future, he repeated, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. He didn't look at me. He looked past me toward the framed photos lining the mantelpiece. Us in Greece, us graduating, us holding the keys to this very apartment. Our future. We need to talk, Sarah. That's never a good preface to anything pleasant, especially not on the night you've just achieved your life's goal. My smile faltered, the champagne suddenly feeling heavy in my hand. I braced myself, thinking maybe he was overwhelmed, maybe he wanted to discuss the relocation he'd just been offered, the one that would take us across the country. I tried to keep my tone light, practice the sympathetic lean I usually reserved for his difficult clients. Is everything all right with the new role? You seem tense. He finally turned, and the look in his eyes wasn't tense. It was arctic. It was the look of a man severing a tie, a surgeon making a clean cut. It's perfect, Sarah. It's everything I wanted. He paused, drawing a breath that sounded too loud in the quiet room, and I realized tonight, standing here, that I don't want to share it with you. The air punched out of my lungs. The room tilted. The sound of the city outside seemed to vanish, replaced by a high-pitched whine in my ears. Share what, Mark? Our life? Our apartment? The mortgage we both signed? I managed to whisper, the words catching in my throat. This wasn't a negotiation. This felt like a declaration of war, launched from the very summit of his victory. He walked over to the fireplace, picked up one of our wedding photos, the one where we looked ridiculously young and hopelessly in love, and turned it face down. I want a divorce, Sarah. I've already spoken to a lawyer. Everything is already being set in motion. The casualness of it, the almost administrative efficiency with which he dismantled a decade of shared existence, was the cruelest blow. He hadn't even waited for the promotion bonus to clear. He had waited only until the ink on the offer letter was dry. You planned this? You waited until you secured the promotion to tell me you were leaving. The betrayal tasted like rust. I felt a desperate need to understand the switch, the moment he decided I was the obstacle to his perfect, newly appointed life. It wasn't sudden, he admitted, his voice softening just enough to sound almost reasonable, which somehow made it worse. I've been unhappy for a long time, and frankly, Sarah, you've become complacent. I need drive. I need someone who understands the trajectory I'm on now. This new position demands a different kind of partner, someone who can network at that level, someone who isn't just comfortable. He gestured vaguely around the expensive living room, his gaze dismissive. I deserve someone who reflects this success. He straightened his tie, looking every inch the newly minted executive, ready for his next acquisition. The papers will be served tomorrow morning. Don't make this difficult. He turned his back on me, moving toward the hallway leading to his study, leaving me standing alone amongst the remnants of a shared dream. I watched his retreating figure, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, and I realized I had one last weapon left in this sudden, brutal endgame. I knew something about Mark's trajectory that his new corporate colleagues certainly didn't. something I'd kept buried deep for years, something that could derail his entire ascent before his new personalized stationery even arrived. But before I could even decide if I should use it, my phone, lying forgotten on the sofa cushion, buzzed violently, displaying a number I recognized instantly, the direct unlisted line for the chairman of the board, and the text message on the screen read only, "Do not let him take that promotion. Call me immediately." The chairman's text message hit my system like a defibrillator shock, overriding the paralyzing numbness of Mark's pronouncement. Do not let him take that promotion. The urgency and the capitalization, the sheer audacity of the message coming from the highest echelon of the company snapped me out of my shocked stupor. Mark was still in the study, presumably composing his legal strategy, or perhaps already drafting an email to HR about separating our company accounts. He hadn't heard the phone buzz. He was too busy celebrating his victory over me. I snatched the phone, my fingers trembling only slightly as I stared at the contact photo. Mr. Sterling, a man whose reputation for ruthlessness was only surpassed by his legendary success. Why would he contact me? We'd met only a handful of times at company functions, polite, distant exchanges where I was introduced as Mark's wonderful wife. He knew nothing about my professional life, which, since marrying Mark, consisted mostly of managing our household and running a small, low-key online book club. Yet, here was the chairman pleading with me to intervene. My mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments. Mark's sudden insistence on divorce, timed precisely with the promotion, suddenly felt less like a personal betrayal and more like a corporate maneuver gone awry. What if this wasn't just about wanting a better partner? What if this promotion came with a massive, career-defining caveat that I, as the complacent wife, was somehow privy to? Or worse, what if I was the reason he needed out so cleanly, so fast? I didn't hesitate. Hesitation was the luxury of the unbetrayed. I dialed Mr. Sterling's number. It rang twice, a long, agonizing stretch of silence where I could almost hear the digital gears turning in Mark's office. Then a crisp, authoritative voice answered. "Sarah, thank God you picked up. I trust Mark hasn't finalized anything with legal yet?" "He served me papers an hour ago," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. The adrenaline was starting to work, sharpening my focus. "He's downstairs in the study. He just got the promotion to senior partner. What is going on, Mr. Sterling? Why are you contacting me?" There was a heavy sigh on the other end, the sound of a powerful man deeply weary of corporate backstabbing. "Sarah, I'm going to be brutally honest because we are out of time. Mark's promotion wasn't earned solely on merit. We discovered late this afternoon, and I mean very late, that he was involved in some highly unethical, potentially illegal, financial maneuvering regarding the Peterson acquisition last quarter. Black market maneuvering, to be blunt." My vision blurred again, but this time it was with sheer disbelief. Mark? The man who preached integrity and worked 90-hour weeks to avoid cutting corners. Illegal? Mark would never— "He did," Sterling cut in sharply. "And the evidence is complex. It's buried deep in internal servers, accessible only through high-level clearance codes he possesses. We were going to fire him quietly tomorrow morning, before the official announcement to contain the scandal. He would have been escorted out before he could even clean out his desk. But he managed to force the promotion through this afternoon by leveraging some leverage on the board. Leverage that I suspect is tied to keeping this information quiet for 24 hours. My blood ran cold. Leverage? What leverage? That's what I don't know, Sarah. But here is the crux of the matter. If he has served divorce papers tonight, before this situation blows up, he instantly gains access to significant assets, including half of the equity in this apartment, which he leveraged heavily in the short term to cover some of those illicit dealings. If he can secure that asset transfer and file for divorce before we serve him termination papers, he walks away with a massive payout, clean hands to the public, and we are left with a catastrophic lawsuit and a massive hole in our quarterly filings. Sterling's voice lowered to a dangerous near whisper. "He's leveraging us, Sarah, and I have a terrible feeling he's leveraging you to secure his exit strategy." A cold dread washed over me. The divorce wasn't about a better partner. It was a financial shield. He needed me divorced, ideally amicably so he could claim marital stability while systematically looting what he could before the inevitable explosion. "What do you need me to do?" I asked, my voice steel now, the injured wife replaced by someone capable of calculated defense. "You need to stop him from filing anything definitive. Stall him. Keep him distracted until our legal team can secure the evidence we need to freeze his assets, which should be in the next few hours. If he gets that filing in before we catch him, he's untouchable." I looked towards the study door. Mark was inside, planning his escape route with surgical precision. He thought he had won the clock game. He thought he was safe because he had secured his career pinnacle and simultaneously targeted mine for destruction. But Mr. Sterling was right. Mark had underestimated the collateral damage. I remembered the safe, tucked behind the loose panel in the back of his walk-in closet, the one he always told me was full of old tax documents, the one he checked obsessively before every major business trip. I knew the combination. I had helped him pick it 15 years ago during a drunken anniversary game. "I know where he keeps the physical evidence of his personal accounts," I confessed into the phone, the words tumbling out. "I know the safe combination. If I can get to that before he serves those papers, I might have leverage of my own." "Sarah, that is dangerous. Do not engage him physically, but if you can secure anything that proves intent to defraud—" Suddenly the study door creaked open, far sooner than I anticipated. Mark stood there, not looking apologetic or even angry, but holding a heavy, leather-bound folio. It wasn't his briefcase. It was the formal embossed portfolio the board uses for official resolutions. And in his hand, tucked neatly inside, was an envelope clearly marked Service of Process. He'd been ready to move the moment I hung up. But he hadn't hung up. He looked down at my phone, then slowly up at my face, his eyes widening in shock as he registered the realization that I was deep in conversation with the chairman. The color drained from his face, replaced by sheer panic. He must have heard my side of the conversation. He made a split-second calculation, and instead of lunging for the phone, he flung the heavy portfolio across the room at my head, intending to knock the phone free before bolting toward the front door. The portfolio whistled past my ear, striking the wall with a dull thud, but the envelope, the one containing the divorce papers, slipped free of the heavy leather cover mid-flight, fluttering down. I watched it drift toward the ground, but I was already moving, propelled by a primal need to stop his escape, to intercept that single piece of paper that represented his claim to legitimacy. I lunged for the envelope, but Mark, fueled by sudden terror, pivoted, kicking a heavy glass side table directly into my path, sending shards of crystal flying just as I reached the threshold of the study, ready to intercept him before he could vanish into the night with my entire life. The impact was violent, sickeningly loud. The heavy mahogany side table, an anniversary gift from Mark's parents, didn't just tip. It seemed to explode outward as Mark's panicked foot connected with its base. Shards of thick, expensive glass erupted like shrapnel. I threw an arm up instinctively, the momentum of my dive carrying me forward, but the table acted as a perfect, deadly barrier. I didn't feel the initial impact on my skin. I felt the sickening crunch as my outstretched hand, reaching desperately for the floating divorce papers, connected instead with the hard edge of a cabinet near the doorframe. A searing, white-hot pain shot up my forearm. I cried out, the sound swallowed instantly by the roar in my own ears. Mark, blessedly clumsy in his terror, hadn't quite cleared the doorway. He was scrambling, his focus entirely on the lock, desperate to escape before Mr. Sterling's legal team could mobilize, before his fragile empire collapsed. He didn't look back at the mess he'd made, or the sound of my genuine agony. He just needed out. I ignored the throbbing in my arm, my vision tunneling onto the single piece of white paper resting innocently on the thick Persian rug, separated from the heavy portfolio, the divorce petition. If he signed that tonight, if he managed to get it officially submitted, even with Sterling's intervention, the legal process would become an intractable nightmare. I had to secure it. With a guttural grunt, I pushed myself up, ignoring the burning scrape across my shin where a large shard of glass must have grazed me. My injured hand was useless, hanging limp and screaming, but my good hand scrabbled across the floor, my fingers closing around the crisp edges of the envelope. Victory. I held the documents tightly to my chest, a shield against the ruin he was trying to impose. Mark finally managed to wrestle the deadbolt open. The sound of the latch clicking free felt like the final severing of our bond. He pulled the door open an inch, enough to slip through, his face a mask of desperate avarice and fear. He glanced back for the first time, expecting me to be incapacitated by the blow, or perhaps just too stunned to move. He saw me standing there, not weeping, not collapsed, but clutching the evidence of his betrayal, blood drying quickly on the back of my hand where a smaller splinter had embedded itself. The momentary look of panic was replaced by cold, hard calculation. He saw the papers in my hand and his eyes flicked instantly to the safe behind the closet panel in the hallway, realizing I hadn't wasted time trying to call the police or even tending to my injury. I was going straight for his actual vault. "Don't be stupid, Sarah," he hissed, his voice low and dangerous, laced with a venom I had never heard directed at me before. "You don't know what you're holding. Give me those papers, and I will make sure the settlement is generous. You walk away comfortable. Try to play hero, and I will make sure you leave with nothing but the clothes on your back and a lifetime of debt for frivolous lawsuits." He took a heavy step back into the apartment, effectively cutting off my exit toward the front door and forcing me back toward the study, toward the hidden safe. He had just admitted to the coercion, the threats, all while standing within earshot of my open line to the chairman. Sterling must have heard the entire exchange. The air crackled with unspoken warfare. I knew then that simply having the papers wasn't enough. Mark would find a way to deny service, claim coercion, anything to delay until his lawyers could spin the narrative. I needed the leverage Sterling was talking about, the proof of the fraud. My gaze flickered past Mark, past the shattered table, to the narrow hallway leading to the master suite, the safe. If I could secure his actual illicit accounting records, the real evidence that could sink his career entirely, then I wouldn't need to negotiate the divorce. I could dictate the terms of his professional execution. "You can keep the papers, Mark," I said, my voice surprisingly calm, almost conversational. I held up my injured hand, flexing the fingers slightly, gauging the pain. "But I'm going for the real assets now, and you and I both know those aren't in the divorce filing." He froze, his hand halfway to locking the door again, his eyes widening not in fear of the divorce, but in the recognition of his actual secret being exposed. He understood exactly which assets I meant. He took a step toward me, menacing, predatory. "You won't get past me." Just as he made his move to intercept me, to shove me aside and rush to secure his hidden secrets, a sound ripped through the apartment that wasn't furniture breaking or shouting. It was the distinct, undeniable sound of multiple heavy boots hitting the marble floor of our foyer, followed immediately by a loud, authoritative series of knocks that rattled the entire front door. Not the polite ring of a legal courier, but the heavy, synchronized impact of a tactical team. Mr. Sterling hadn't been bluffing about moving fast. Mark heard it too. His face went ashen, his eyes darting from the front door, now heavily guarded by external forces, to me, standing between him and the safe, clutching the initial evidence. He let out a strangled sound of defeat, realizing he was caught in a perfect, inescapable vice. He lunged not for the door, but for the small, antique silver letter opener resting on the hall console table, the sharp point catching the light as he swung it wildly toward my midsection, not aiming to injure, but to create chaos long enough to make a break for the back exit. The silver letter opener, a delicate, ornate thing we'd picked up in Florence, flashed dangerously close to my ribs. Mark's wild swing was fueled by pure, cornered animal panic. He wasn't trying to kill me, not yet, but he was absolutely trying to disable me, to create the necessary window of opportunity to either grab the divorce papers or sprint past me toward the kitchen exit, which led to the rarely used back alley. The chaos of the moment was my only chance. My instinct, honed by years of suppressing my own true reactions to keep his volatile career stable, kicked in. Instead of dodging backward into the hallway where the tactical team was surely about to breach the front door, I pivoted sharply, using the momentum of his swing against him. I slammed my good shoulder into his chest, hard, driving him off balance. He staggered, the letter opener scraping uselessly against the wall paneling behind me. The crash at the front door intensified. It wasn't just knocking now, it was the heavy, focused battering of professional entry tools against reinforced wood. "Open up! Federal agents!" The shout, muffled but clear, confirmed Mr. Sterling's swift, devastating action. Mark looked utterly destroyed, trapped between the impending legal assault from the front and the secret he knew I was about to uncover in the back. He shoved me again, harder this time, but I held tight to the envelope of divorce papers, refusing to relinquish my only claim to a clean slate. "You signed your own death warrant, Sarah!" He spat, eyes wild. He abandoned the letter opener, spinning toward the kitchen. He knew the back door was less secure, but it was his only non-confrontational route out. I didn't pursue him immediately. My injured arm was throbbing mercilessly, but the pain in my conscience was finally receding, replaced by a cold, focused clarity. I had bought myself precious seconds. I launched myself down the hall, ignoring the debris, heading straight for the walk-in closet, the safe. This was the moment of truth. I tore open the hidden panel. There it was, a small, matte black safe, blending perfectly with the dark wood. My fingers, though clumsy with the injured right hand, flew over the keypad, inputting the anniversary combination, 102898. The tumblers clicked with alarming speed. Mark had always been meticulous about security, but he had never anticipated the combination being used against him by the person he deemed weakest. The heavy door swung open silently. Inside, it wasn't just financial statements. There were encrypted USB drives, thick stacks of bound documents detailing offshore transfers, and most damningly, a handwritten ledger detailing kickbacks and falsified expense reports spanning 3 years. This was the corporate nuclear option. This wasn't just about Marcus avoiding a quiet firing. This was criminal conspiracy. As I reached in to grab the most incriminating ledger, a heavy leather-bound book marked only with an illegible symbol, I heard a shout from the front of the house. The door had given way. I heard heavy footsteps pounding through the living room, the voices sharp and official. "Clear, check the periphery." I grabbed the ledger, stuffing it inside the loose folds of my silk robe, the weight surprisingly grounding. I was seconds away from being found by federal agents who were here for Mark, not for me. I could present the ledger to them, and I would be clear. But as I turned to leave the closet, I saw it. A small, innocuous key tucked beneath one of the USB sticks. It was a key I recognized instantly. The key to the small, rented safety deposit box Mark kept off-site. The one he used for things he absolutely could never let me see, let alone the auditors. I hesitated for a fraction of a second. The sound of heavy boots was rapidly approaching the master suite hallway. If I ran out now, I could hand the ledger over and declare myself a victim. But that key, what did it unlock? Another layer of deceit? Another secret financial safety net he'd prepared? I had to know. A lifetime of being his accessory was ending, but what if this key unlocked my real freedom, not just my negotiated exit? I snatched the key just as the closet door swung open with tremendous force, hitting the far wall with a deafening crack. Standing there, framed by the doorway, wasn't a federal agent. It was Mark. He hadn't fled out the back. He had doubled back, using his intimate knowledge of the floor plan, moving silently while the agents descended on the front entrance. He was breathing heavily, his face slick with sweat, his eyes locked onto the bulge beneath my robe. The ledger. He didn't look like a corporate executive anymore. He looked like a cornered predator. In his hand, he held not the silver opener, but the heavy polished brass knob he'd just ripped from the closet door, and he raised it high above his head, ready to bring it down on the very last thing separating him from ruin. The brass doorknob caught the harsh overhead light, looking heavy and lethal in Mark's sweat-sheened hand. His face was contorted, stripped bare of the charming facade he'd worn for years. This was the true Mark, the one capable of professional assassination and personal violence when backed into a corner. He roared, a sound of pure, desperate fury, and swung the heavy metal downward, aiming not for the ledger, but for my head, a final chaotic act of self-preservation. I didn't scream. I didn't retreat further into the closet. I knew with absolute certainty that if I let him connect, everything, the ledger, the key, my very life, would be lost in the ensuing darkness. I reacted by dropping low, an almost involuntary crouch that took me under the arc of the swing. The brass knob whistled over my scalp, smashing into the wooden shelving behind me with a splintering crack that sounded like a gunshot in the enclosed space. In the instant he was off balance from the missed strike, I surged forward, not toward the hallway, but directly into his space. I slammed my good shoulder, the uninjured one, into his midsection with all the force adrenaline could muster, driving him backward and pinning him momentarily against the wall just inside the doorway. He grunted, shocked by the ferocity of the counterattack from the woman he'd dismissed as complacent. "It's over, Mark," I managed to gasp out, my voice raw but steady. I jammed the heavy, leather-bound ledger, the smoking gun of his corporate crimes, out of my robe and hurled it with surprising accuracy past him, toward the main hallway where the muffled shouts of the federal agents indicated their search pattern. It landed with a satisfying thud on the hardwood floor, clearly visible as a major piece of evidence. Mark watched the ledger roll away, his expression shifting from rage to utter defeat. He knew the game was lost. He didn't even bother trying to retrieve it. He simply sagged against the wall, defeated not by his board, but by the woman he had contemptuously cast aside. It was at that exact moment that two figures in dark tactical gear burst into the master bedroom, their weapons raised but instantly lowered when they saw the tableau. Mark passively leaning against the wall and me, Sarah, standing over the fallen evidence, clutching my bleeding arm. "Federal agents, hands where we can see them!" one shouted, his eyes quickly assessing the scene. Mark didn't resist as the agents moved in, securing him with practiced efficiency. He was silent, his eyes fixed on me with a look that wasn't hatred, but a deep, chilling pity for the man he had become. As they led him past me toward the front door, one agent paused to check my injury. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" "Just a cut," I managed, my focus entirely on the small, insignificant safety deposit key still clutched tightly in my left hand. I shook my head slightly toward the agents. "He's done. He won't try anything else." They led him out, the metallic click of handcuffs echoing through the apartment. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the receding sirens and the hushed instructions of the remaining agents securing the perimeter and cataloging the evidence from the safe. Mr. Sterling himself, looking surprisingly composed for someone who had just orchestrated a midnight raid, walked into the room moments later, his expression grave. He surveyed the shattered glass and the overturned furniture, then nodded curtly at me. "Sarah, thank you. You saved this firm a multi-million-dollar catastrophe, and quite possibly your own future." He paused, looking at the ledger. "That ledger proves everything we suspected. He will be facing serious charges." I nodded, the adrenaline finally receding, leaving behind a heavy, bone-deep exhaustion. "I want full cooperation regarding the divorce settlement, Mr. Sterling, complete transparency, and I want the dissolution finalized within 48 hours. Sterling didn't blink. "Consider it done. You will be taken care of, Sarah. More than taken care of." I walked slowly back to the hallway where Mark had stood moments before. The front door was wide open, revealing the flashing blue and red lights painting streaks across the pavement. I looked down at my left hand, the one that remained unmarked, the one still tightly gripping the small safety deposit box key. I knew Mark had lost his career, his freedom, and his prized promotion, but the key felt significant, a tangible link to a secret I hadn't yet exposed. I looked toward the window, toward the distant glow of the city skyline, realizing that karma had indeed been fast. It had destroyed Mark's ascent with surgical precision, but my own future was now utterly blank, and this little piece of brass was the first blueprint I held for a life entirely my own. I walked over to the overturned glass table, picked up my intact phone, and dialed a number I had never dared to call before. The number for the lawyer Mr. Sterling had mentioned, the one who specialized in defending victims of high-level corporate fraud. I looked at the key one last time, a tiny promise of independent discovery. Tomorrow I would find out what was in that box, and then truly I would begin living.